The valley darkened faster than I anticipated. Even though the sun still clung to the horizon, the shadows were already thickening, crawling along the rocks and underbrush as if the trees themselves were leaning in closer. Every feel and every leaf seemed to whisper secrets I couldn't understand, and the air carried a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. It pressed against my skin, a quiet accusation, a reminder that I was not meant to be there. I stopped at a bend in the trail where the path narrowed between two jagged boulders. The mist that had been lingering all day gathered like a river pooling in a hollow. It was subtle at first, almost playful, teasing me with glimpses of movement. But then the shadows began to stretch, taking shapes that were unmistakably humanoid. My mind flinched at the thought, but I forced my legs to move forward. I reminded myself of the rules I had been told: never make direct eye contact, never break the rhythm, respect their path. But as I walked, I realized that respect was not enough. The marchers didn't forgive for ignorance, they didn't wait for apologies, and they didn't allow hesitation. Every step had to be deliberate, each breath measured. I felt my pulse sync with something I couldn't see, a rhythm older than any clock, older than the valley itself. A rustle in the underbrush made me freeze. I could feel the eyes on me, not just watching, but weighing, judging. One step, one miscalculation, and I knew the consequences could extend beyond the immediate. The night marchers were not mindless spirits. They were sentinels bound to the sacred memories of the land, bound to the unbroken chain of warriors who had walked here long before me. The air seemed to pulse around me, every breath a reminder that the valley itself was alive, aware, recording my intrusion. Then I heard it, a faint, metallic echo, like distant swords clashing or ceremonial staffs tapping on stone. It wasn't loud enough to alarm any rational sense, but my chest tightened at the resonance. It was a sound that carried history, weight, and power in equal measure. The path opened into a clearing, and for a moment I dared to look at the valley floor. The shadows moved differently here, almost flowing, and I could see faint outlines of figures, ghostly, elongated, ceremonial. They weren't marching yet, but their presence filled the clearing as if it had been shaped specifically for them. Every tree, every rock, every curl of mist seemed to anticipate their arrival. A sudden breeze carried whispers of chants. They were low, guttural, rolling in a language I didn't understand, yet the meaning was unmistakable. They were warnings, acknowledgments, and commands, layered together in a tapestry of sound that my mind could barely grasp. I felt my steps falter, not out of fear, but from the realization that I was participating in something far older, far larger than myself. I took a careful step forward, and the wind shifted again, bringing with it the faint glint of armor and ceremonial adornments among the shadows. My heart slammed against my ribs. I could see movement at the edges of my vision, figures taking form, emerging from mist, perfectly aligned with the rhythm of their ancient march. Even unseen, their authority was palpable. The valley seemed to constrict around me, each tree leaned closer, each shadow stretched toward me, and the sound of drums, or what I imagined as drums, pounded in my chest. I realized that even if I ran, even if I hid, the marchers' presence would follow. Their rhythm was imprinted in the land, and in some way, imprinted in me now too. I pressed onward, careful not to stumble, careful not to speak, careful not to draw attention. The clearing ended, and the path continued through thicker brush. I could feel them now, not behind me, but surrounding me in invisible waves. Every breath I took, every thought I held, seemed to echo back with significance. I was no longer just an observer, I was an unwilling participant in a ceremony that had endured centuries. By the time the trail curved again toward a ridge, the first hints of torchlight, or perhaps the glint of ceremonial lanterns, appeared in the distance. My legs moved automatically, carrying me toward it, yet my mind could not relax. The marchers were patient, meticulous, eternal, and even in the daylight, in moments like this, they reminded me that nothing human could ever truly contain them. The forest pressed close as I continued along the narrow trail, and the fading light only made every detail sharper, every sound heavier, every shadow more threatening. I could feel the valley shifting subtly around me, almost as if the trees themselves were leaning in to watch, to listen, to judge. Every step I took seemed amplified, echoing in ways that made my heartbeat feel too loud, my breath too noticeable. The mist had grown thicker, curling around my ankles like living fingers, clinging, teasing, and it carried with it a faint scent I couldn't place. It was sweet and metallic, like wet iron mixed with something older, something ancient. I realized I was breathing it in, each inhalation a silent contract with the air, with the valley, with whatever force had chosen to follow me. Then I heard it, a distant drumbeat, soft at first, like the tapping of a finger against wood. But it wasn't random. Each tap fell into a rhythm, slow and deliberate, heavy, measured. My stomach nodded as I recognized it. It was the march itself. The night marchers were coming, and the valley, as if complicit, had begun to announce their approach. Every shadow seemed to shift with intent. A branch moved in a way no wind could explain. A patch of mist rose and fell as if breathing. I felt eyes on me, hundreds of them, though none visible. My body wanted to flee, but my mind told me otherwise. Do not run, do not speak, do not look directly. I had memorized those rules, but now, understanding their meaning, I realized they were survival itself. I stopped at a fallen log to steady myself, my hands gripping the rough bark, feeling the texture, the age of it, imagining how many times the marcher's feet had pressed this same path, how many lives had crossed this same stretch of earth centuries ago. The valley's history pressed against me, and I felt it in my bones. A sudden rustle to my left made me snap my head, though I quickly forced it back forward. Movement, a flicker, a shadow that darted between the trees was enough to make my chest tighten. It wasn't a human form, not exactly, but it had shape, intent, and awareness. And then the chanting began, low at first, almost imperceptible, but growing, folding into itself. Echoing across the valley, the words were foreign, impossibly old, yet their meaning was clear in the marrow of my fear. The trail curved, and I realized the path had narrowed further, hemmed in by jagged rocks and dense thickets. My footing became precarious, and with each step I could feel the rhythm of the night marchers behind me, invisible yet undeniable. Their presence was not just in the air, but in the vibration beneath my feet, in the subtle pull of the wind, in the shadows that seemed to stretch toward me with purpose. A sudden flash of metallic gleam caught my eye, a reflection, perhaps, or the glint of ceremonial adornments. I forced my gaze down immediately, remembering the warning. The marchers didn't need eyes to see you. They could feel the intrusion, sense hesitation, measure courage and fear. Every instinct in me screamed to run, yet I could not. My feet moved, My body carried me forward, but my mind was frozen in awe and terror, trying to map the scale of what I was witnessing. Then I felt it, a subtle vibration in the earth itself, like the pulse of a heartbeat, slow but relentless. It was beneath my feet, moving through the stones and soil, a reminder that the valley itself was a participant, that the march was not just of spirits, but of memory, of power, of history made flesh. My pulse matched the vibration instinctively, and I realized that my body had been marked in some tangible way by their rhythm. I kept moving, careful with every step, my ears straining for any hint of proximity. Then faintly, a figure emerged through the mist, its outline taller than any human, its posture rigid and ceremonial. It paused, as if mirroring me, then continued without a glance, each step in perfect synchronization with the pulse I had begun to feel in my own chest. The chanting grew louder now, interwoven with sounds I couldn't identify, metallic clinks, distant horns, rhythmic stomps that seemed to rise from the ground itself. My throat tightened and I swallowed hard, realizing the fear was no longer just for me, but for any trespasser who had dared to witness this march. I understood then that the night marchers were not just spirits, they were the valley's memory, its justice, its power made audible and corporeal. As I emerged from the thicket onto a wider stretch of the path, I glimpsed more figures, partially obscured by mist, yet moving with purpose and authority. They weren't marching in the conventional sense. It was a ritual, precise, inexorable, and eternal. I could feel it in the air, in the vibrations, in the sway of the trees, in the subtle pressure of the wind. Every element of the environment was alive with them. I realized that witnessing even a fragment of this march was enough to mark me forever. The valley had claimed my attention, my awareness, my very being in the night marcher's presence was now staged into my consciousness. I took another cautious step forward, knowing that the path would not forgive missteps, and that the marchers would continue, patient, eternal, and inevitable. By the time I reached the next bend in the trail, darkness had fully claimed the valley, but not the kind of darkness that simply hides. You could feel it, thick and heavy, pressing against your skin and lungs as though the air itself carried weight. Each breath I drew tasted faintly metallic, mingled with the scent of wet earth, moss, and something older, almost decaying, but undeniably alive. Every sound was magnified. A distant drip of water became a drumbeat. A snapped twig underfoot sounded like a cannon shot. I could feel the presence before I could see it. The night marchers were close, my skin prickled with anticipation and dread. Even though I hadn't seen the figures directly, I knew they were there, moving with purpose and authority. The rhythm, the pulse in the earth beneath my feet was growing stronger. It matched my heartbeat, like the valley itself had bound me to their march. A low chant floated through the mist, almost imperceptible at first, then rising, weaving around the trees, slipping through the underbrush, vibrating in my chest. I could not understand the words, but their meaning was immediate. This is sacred. This is history. This is power, and you are intruding. I remembered the warnings I'd been given. Never make eye contact, never step off the path, never speak. I clutched the tree trunk for stability as I stepped forward. The bark rough and damp under my hands. My legs felt heavy, every movement deliberate, every breath measured, as though my body had learned instinctively the pace required to survive this moment. Then, through the mist, I glimpsed the first full figure. It was taller than any man, elongated, ceremonial, wearing gleaming armor that caught the faint light in glints that seemed to float above the mist. The figure didn't look at me, it didn't need to, but I felt its gaze anyway, measured and assessing, cutting through my very thoughts. A shiver ran down my spine. The chanting became louder, more layered, almost orchestral. Metallic sounds accompanied it, the clash of weapons, the rattle of armor, the scrape of ceremonial staffs. The rhythm was relentless, and I realized that if I faltered, even for a second, the valley would not forgive. My muscles tensed, my every nerve screamed with alertness. I was no longer merely observing, they were aware of me. As I moved, I noticed shadows dancing at the edges of the clearing, figures partially formed, half seen, lingering in and out of the mist. Their presence was heavy, oppressive, and inescapable. Every tree seemed to sway toward them, every leaf rustled with intent. The valley itself had become part of the ritual, an accomplice in maintaining the march. The pulse beneath my feet was now almost unbearable, reverberating in my bones. I could feel the rhythm in my chest, matching my heartbeat. It was as though the march had claimed a piece of me, tethering me to their eternal rhythm. My thoughts grew sharp, almost frantic, and as I realized the marchers were not only guardians of the past, but keepers of memory, of life, and death, of balance. I was intruding on something beyond my comprehension, yet every step demanded obedience. Through the mist, more figures emerged, now in a line that stretched beyond sight. Their movements were precise and silent except for the layered sounds of the chant and the ritual percussion. I could feel the weight of their history, the countless lives they represented, the power they commanded. The air vibrated with it, carrying a reverent terror that I could neither escape nor resist. I pressed onward, taking the narrow path between boulders and underbrush, feeling every branch, every stone, every leaf with heightened awareness. One false step, one lapse in concentration could draw attention in ways I could not anticipate. Yet I moved, compelled by a mix of fear and fascination, unable to tear my eyes, or rather, my awareness from the unfolding spectacle. And then I heard it. The first true sound of marching feet, not just the rhythm beneath the earth, but a physical, resonant, undeniable sound. Each step landed in a perfect unison, a declaration that the night marchers were real, eternal, and unstoppable. My pulse quickened. I could feel it echoing in the air, vibrating through my chest, merging with the pulse of the valley. The mist thickened around me, obscuring the full view, yet offering glimpses of ceremonial grab, of ancient weapons, of ghostly faces partially concealed beneath helms and shadows. Each glimpse heightened the dread, sharpened the fascination. I realized that the marchers were everywhere at once, or at least the valley made it so. No matter where I looked, I felt surrounded. I stopped briefly, crouching beneath a boulder just to steady my breath. The valley held its own rhythm, guiding me forward, testing me, reminding me that intrusion was possible, but survival depended on respect, caution, and awareness. The figures did not deviate, they did not falter, yet their power was palpable in every motion, in every echo, in every shift of mist. I continued forward, each step deliberate, feeling more and more like a part of the valley's memory, a witness tethered to something far older than myself. The night marchers were no longer a distant legend. They were here, undeniable, eternal, and they would not be forgotten. The valley seemed to contract around me as though the trees, the rocks, and the mist itself had decided that there was no longer any space for casual observation. Every movement I made was deliberate, calculated, measured, yet even that seemed insufficient. The night marchers were no longer just behind me or in front of me. They had become the rhythm of the valley itself, a pulse in the soil, in the wind, in the faint rustle of leaves that no breeze could explain. The chanting had grown insistent now, filling the space between the trees with a vibrating resonance that pressed against my ears and chest. I could feel it deep in my bones, a language older than any I had known, and yet I understood it with a clarity that was terrifying. It spoke of vigilance, of consequence, of the thin line between trespass and respect. I realized with a sudden clarity that the night marchers were not just moving, they were measuring me, my courage, my awareness, my very presence. A sudden flash of movement through the fog drew my eyes, and I froze. Figures, impossibly tall, impossibly rigid, emerged from the mist, carrying ceremonial weapons and banners that glimmered faintly in the ambient light. Their armor, adorned with symbols I could not recognize, seemed both physical and spectral, tangible yet unreal. They did not speak, they did not acknowledge me directly, and yet I felt their attention like a weight pressing on my shoulders, settling deep into my chest. I crouched behind a moss-covered boulder, straining to breathe quietly. Every sound I made, every creak of my boots, every inhalation felt magnified. The mist swirled unnaturally around the figures, hugging their forms, accentuating the rhythm of their passage. The pulse beneath my feet intensified. I realized it was no longer just a vibration in the ground. It was a heartbeat that belonged simultaneously to the valley, to the marchers, and now, in some inexplicable way, to me. As I moved forward again, careful not to stumble, I noticed how the figures interacted with the environment. The mist parted before them, the trees leaned subtly to make way, the ground seemed to absorb their steps rather than resist. They were not just walking, they were commanding the world around them, and I felt every inch of that power seep into my awareness. A voice, a whisper, slipped through the fog, unintelligible but laden with intent. My skin crawled. I couldn't tell whether it had come from one of the figures or the valley itself. Perhaps it didn't matter. The message was clear. You are being watched, measured, and remembered. I pressed onward, each step heavier than the last, every muscle coiled, my mind hyper-aware of the thin layer of safety provided by ignorance and obedience. Then came a sound I could not anticipate, a sound echo of footsteps behind me, perfectly synchronized with the rhythm of the marchers ahead. My heart jumped and I froze in place. The pulse in the earth seemed to respond, quickening, contracting, almost as if testing my resolve. I realized with horror that the marchers were not bound to a single direction. Their presence flowed through the valley like water, ever moving, ever surrounding, inevitable. I forced myself to keep moving, careful not to glance sideways, careful not to make any abrupt movements. Every rustle, every distant snap of a twig felt like a warning. The valley itself had become a maze, each turn, each inch line, each shadow carefully arranged to amplify the power and presence of the night marchers. I understood that this was not merely a walk, it was a ritual, an evaluation, a test that had persisted for centuries. Through the swirling mist, I glimpsed the spectacle outlines of more figures. They were legion, stretching far beyond the reach of my eyes, and yet each moved with precise intention. Some carried weapons, others held torches that cast eerie, flickering light that barely pierced the fog. Their faces were obscured, but their intent was visible. They were guardians of the valley, keepers of history, and executors of consequence. The rhythm of the march grew more pronounced, more insistent, vibrating through my bones and merging with the pulse of my own heartbeat. I realized that the valley had become a living entity, and I, for better or worse, had become a part of it. I was no longer just an observer, I was a participant, tethered to a ritual older than I could comprehend, yet utterly real in its power. And then a moment of silence. The mist thickened, the chanting softened, the pulse in the ground steadied. I exhaled slowly, realizing that for now the marchers had accepted my presence but not my understanding. I was alive but marked, tethered, and forever changed by what I had witnessed. The night marchers were eternal, and so too was the weight of being seen by them. The mist had grown almost tangible now, curling around me in thick, silvered coils that clung to my skin and clothes, soaking with me the chill of centuries-old moisture. Every step I took felt like walking through a world that existed half in reality and half in memory, where the boundary between the living and the eternal was a thin, wavering line. The pulse beneath my feet persisted, steady, unyielding, demanding attention, demanding respect. I had long since stopped thinking of it as a sound or rhythm. It had become a part of my own heartbeat, an inseparable companion that reminded me that I was being evaluated. I paused near a bend in the valley where a stand of ancient oaks leaned over a creek. Their roots, twisted like serpents, half exposed, grasping the earth with a stubborn grip. Through the fog, I could see faint flickers of light, torches carried by figures moving with the certainty of those who had walked this path for centuries. Their chanting had shifted in tone, lower, resonant, echoing against the rock and water in a way that made my teeth hum. I had learned now not to breathe too loudly, not to look too closely. Every sense was stretched to its maximum. I could smell the moss and decay, feel the moisture soak in my clothes, hear the distant trickle of water amplified into a symphony by the mist, and yet there was something else, a metallic tang in the air that made my stomach knot. Something ancient, powerful, and very aware of my presence. One of the figures stepped close enough that I could see the outlines of ceremonial markings on the armor, symbols I could not decipher, yet they seemed alive, pulsing faintly, vibrating with energy that felt older than the mountains themselves. The figure's eyes, no, their eyes weren't human, though they seemed to pierce through mine, held me frozen in place, mirroring my intent, my courage, my respect for the sacred. I remembered my grandmother's warning when I was a child about respecting places that were older than us, about not speaking aloud but should remain silent. I had forgotten those lessons until now, until the valley reminded me in the only way it knew how. The chanting grew louder again, layered in complex harmonics that seemed impossible for human voices to produce. The night marchers were not only walking, they were asserting the presence of generations past, claiming the land with the rhythm that had survived centuries of intrusion. I felt like a trespasser in time, wandering among guardians whose authority could not be challenged. A branch snapped nearby. I froze instantly, convinced I had drawn their attention, but then realized the sound had come from nowhere, no wind, no animal. The mist itself seemed to breathe and move with intention. The pulse beneath my feet quickened slightly, sinking with a tightening in my chest. I realized I was being drawn further into their procession, my body guarded by the force of their presence, my mind tethered to the rhythm of their eternal march. At a particularly narrow passage between two rocky outcroppings, the figures slowed, creating a corridor I was compelled to pass through, their weapons faintly glinting were held with ceremonial precision. Yet there was no threat in their posture, only a reminder of the sacredness of this march. I was invisible in a sense, yet more visible than I had ever felt in my life. I forced myself to move deliberately, one foot in front of the other, feeling the mist brush my face like the fingertips of 1,000 unseen hands. The chanting softened into a whispering rhythm, like water flowing over stone, and for a brief, terrifying moment, I sensed the souls of those long gone, warriors, chiefs, ancestors, all marching with intent and purposes. They were here, eternal, and they remembered every life, every action, every disrespect. The pulse beneath me shifted slightly, an almost imperceptible cadence change which made me stumble slightly, reminding me that the valley was alive, the marchers were alive, and my presence was no accident. I caught my balance and pressed onward, feeling my own fear and awe mingling into something I could not name. I was no longer just a human observing a legend. I was part of it, if only fleetingly tethered to a ritual that defied itself the time. As I moved through the fog, the figures receded slightly into the distance, their presence still palpable, the rhythm still tethered to my heartbeat. I realized then that the night marchers were both merciful and relentless. They would allow me passage, but only if I respected their space, honored their ritual, and acknowledged the weight of history that clung to the valley like the mist itself. The mist had thickened into a near solid wall, curling and folding around the trees, the rocks, and my every movement. By now, I had long since abandoned hope of remaining unnoticed. The night marchers were no longer distant echoes. They were a living, breathing presence that permeated every inch of the valley. Their rhythm, the pulse that had guided me since I entered, was now inseparable from my own heartbeat. I could not distinguish where the valley ended and the march began. Ahead, through the swirling fog, I glimpsed the full line of marchers, stretching far beyond sight, a procession that seemed to loop into eternity. Each figure carried a presence heavier than life itself, an authority older than mountains, older than the rivers. Their ceremonial garb shimmered faintly, almost like liquid shadow, catching the faint moonlight in patterns I could not comprehend. The faint metallic glints of their weapons, the ritual staffs, the torches, they were not just tools. They were extensions of the marchers' will, instruments of their eternal claim on the land. The chanting rose, layered now with voices I could feel rather than hear. It resonated in my chest, vibrating through my bones, threading through my thoughts, tugging at my senses. The valley itself seemed to respond, rocks and trees echoing with a reverberation that made me feel simultaneously small and infinite. I realized I was walking within a memory older than myself, yet entirely immediate, alive, and unavoidable. As I moved forward, a sudden figure emerged from the fog, closer than the rest. Its eyes glowed faintly beneath the helm, a luminescence that was neither malevolent nor benign, but pure awareness. I froze. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to drop to the ground, to hide, but something deeper, respect, awe, terror kept me rooted. The figure raised its head slightly, not as a warning, not as a greeting, but as if acknowledging that I had made it this far without faltering, without dishonoring the sacred rhythm of the march. The pulse beneath my feet shifted again, faster now, matching the tightening of my chest, the quickening of my breath. I understood something then. This was no ordinary ritual. The night marchers existed to remind the living that history was not gone, that the past had power, that the land remembered, and it measured every trespass, every misstep, every intrusion. I was being evaluated not just as an intruder, but as a witness, and witnesses were bound by rules older than law, older than civilization. The fog began to thin slightly, revealing glimpses of the valley in startling clarity. Shadows of trees stretched impossibly long, the creek shimmered as though silvered with spectral light, and the figures marched on relentlessly. I felt the weight of their gaze even from afar, and I realized that their attention was both terrifying and strangely protective. They did not strike without reason. They did not linger without purpose. I was learning with every heartbeat the rhythm of their world. Then, as if sensing my comprehension, the entire procession shifted, the mist swirling around them like smoke, blurring their edges, making the line seem infinite, stretching beyond the valley, beyond time itself. The chanting reached a peak. A chorus of hundreds, maybe thousands, echoed across the mountains, the trees, and the night. I could feel the energy in my chest, in my skull, a presence that was almost physical. I was caught in a force far beyond human comprehension, yet entirely real, entirely present, and entirely unavoidable. And then, as abruptly as it had begun, the moment shifted. The chanting softened, the pulse slowed, and the figures receded into the mist once more, leaving only whispers, only the faint resonance of rhythm in the valley. I was alone, or at least alone in the visible sense. The valley still carried the weight of their presence, and I knew I had been marked, changed, tethered to a secret that few could survive witnessing without being transformed. I looked around, the fog still curling and swirling, the moonlight barely illuminating the path, and I realized I had survived, but I had witnessed something eternal. The night marchers were not gone. They would never leave. Their march continued, always, everywhere, beyond the limits of sight and sound. And I was now part of that story, a keeper of the memory, a witness bound by the rhythm that pulsed beneath my feet and through my chest. I left the valley that night with the sound of their march still in my ears, the pressure in my chest reminding me of my place in the long line of history they represented. The night marchers were eternal, and so too was the terror, the awe, the respect they demanded. I had entered as an observer. I left as part of the march. This is not the end of the story, but if you have listened this far, make sure you subscribe the channel and like the video and share it, because your subscription gives me energy to speak more hours and hours of voiceover to entertain you people. Thank you so much for being the part of this legacy.